The next tutorial that we're covering is the H.G. Wells tutorial. So it's just going to cover this one author. Your learning target is that you can review H.G. Wells' life and you can analyze his social critiques in his science fiction novel, The Time Machine. All right, so again, super important to understanding the elements that go into a science fiction story and some of the stuff that you're asked to do in the lesson activity, and then what's going to be on the test. Go through the tutorial if you haven't, stop now. Okay, so the only reading that we have to do from the Time Machine is chapter 5. It is a little bit long, and in the post on Google Classroom, I have included a recorded reading of just this chapter that you can read along with if you so choose. So we are just looking at this one chapter to answer these questions. So let's go over the questions. Then we're going to play a full story summary that's going to give you a full overview of the whole story. And then I'm going to go and do one that just covers chapter 5 so we get a little bit more in-depth information to help. So, how does the time traveler seem to feel about the Eloi and the Morlocks? What is his feelings like that you get from this chapter? How does this excerpt from chapter 5 reveal the time traveler's initial theory of the social structure that exists in the society he visits? What is his first impression of the relationship between the Eloi and the Morlocks and the ways that they have evolved? What does this excerpt reveal about Wells' view of capitalism and class in the Britain of his day? And then Charles Darwin's theories on evolution had a major impact on Victorian ideals about the world and humanity's place in it. His theory of natural selection suggested that species could survive intense competition and adapt to their environment, were genetically superior and were the ones to survive. Many people in the Victorian era took Darwin's theory one step further to make assumptions about the social classes. They falsely believed that the upper class was genetically superior to the working class. How does Wells critique the flawed principles of social Darwinism in the Time Machine? And then this one asks you to think about science fiction. We'll talk about that one later. I'm actually only going to play the chapter 5 summary, and then we'll talk about the first 3 questions because I don't want your answers to be skewed by knowing more. And then we'll do the whole thing. Because after reading over the questions, I want to make sure you have it the right mindset for it. Okay, cool.
In Chapter 5 of The Time Machine, the full moon rises as the time traveler looks from high atop a hill, perched in an ornate but decaying throne of a chair, to where he left the time machine, but he doesn't see it. Terrified, he races back to the little lawn where he landed only to discover the time machine has vanished. The time traveler feels the presence of an unseen but powerful force, and he doesn't believe the little people are strong enough to have moved the machine, let alone sustain curiosity about it. Searching the area, he startles some sort of white animal that he takes for a small deer. Weeping, the time traveler eventually falls asleep. The next morning, he wakes up determined to make the best of his situation. He will learn the ways of his new civilization. Examining the lawn more closely, the time traveler notices a single groove and narrow footprints leading to the pedestal on which the white sphinx stands. Knocking on the pedestal, he discovers its hollow, which leads him to believe the machine is inside. After banging on the pedestal's bronze panels, he gives up and instead explores the surrounding countryside. He comes across a number of circular wells. He hears a thudding motion from below, which he concludes is part of some sort of subterranean ventilation system. Later that day, the time traveler rescues a little drowning woman from a river. Her name is Weena, and she then follows him wherever he goes. The time traveler comes across a strange white ape-like creature in the shadows that runs away when he touches it. Following it, he watches as it climbs down a ladder inside one of the wells. It strikes the time traveler that perhaps mankind has not remained one species, but had evolved into 2 distinct animals. One inhabits the surface, the other below. But what is this creature's role? And what is down below? He concludes that this second species has evolved as an underground creature. That's why it is white, like most animals that live in the dark. It has large eyes and avoids the daylight. There must be a vast system of underground tunnels. All of this, he concludes, is the inevitable result of a gradual widening of the gap between the capitalist and the laborer. The workers built the subways and railroads. The educated wealthy got better educated and more refined.
Okay, hold on one second. We may as well just do this. Okay, so we're talking about that. So here you get what is his first impression. So these people must be the people who like live above. These are people that live below. And then this is right here. What does this excerpt reveal about Wells' view of capitalism in Britain today? And so that's really what this is about. This idea that the people who are doing the work built all the stuff, they live below ground. The capitalists, the people on top, literally live above ground. And so that should help with that part.
The capitalist and the laborer. The workers built the subways and railroads. The educated wealthy got better educated and more refined. It must be that the haves are above and the have-nots are below. The time traveler admits in his narration here that this was not fully the case. In Chapter 5 of The Time Machine, the time traveler discovers that there are actually two sets of creatures living in this future world. The Eloi, the little people, and the Morlocks, the nearly blind, white, primate-like creatures that live underground. The themes of evolution and class struggle surface here. Drawing on Charles Darwin's ideas about the evolution of species, the time traveler believes that humankind has diversified, but not in a single straight line. Instead, it has evolved into two separate species based around labor and luxury. In this future land, the social classes of the 19th century have evolved into separate species of humans.
Okay. So how does he seem to feel about it? Like he seems a little bit frightened by the Morlocks. He's like, oh, they're kind of ape-like. And then he finds the Eloi cute, small, and charming. And then, so his initial theory of the social structure is that the haves are above and the have-nots are below. So that's his first initial theory, and that's his impression of the relationships. And then he reasons that they evolved because the laborers are the ones doing all the stuff underground, and then the capitalists are above. And then we get part C there. Talks a little bit here too. In part D, we got a little bit at the end of that. So now, just to give you an idea of the full story, it's only 3 minutes. As far as the summary goes, this is for the full Time Machine. It might help you with answering those questions a little bit more in depth.
Let's summarize the plot of The Time Machine. In the introduction, the time traveler introduces his theories about time travel, and then his actual time machine, to a group of assembled men. And he shows them a working model of the time machine. During the rising action, the group reconvenes at the house a week later, and the time traveler isn't there. The guests sit down to dinner when the time traveler appears, pale, dirty, and bleeding, claiming to have traveled through time. Almost the entirety of the rest of the novel is the time traveler's recalling of his adventure to his guests. That morning, the time traveler set out in his time machine. Flying into the future, he crashed on a little lawn in the year 802,701. He observed strange, beautiful, but derelict buildings, a white sphinx, lush gardens, and small, innocent people called Eloi, who act like children. He rescues a drowning Eloi named Weena, who then becomes devoted to him. The time traveler comes across a large circular well with a ladder. He hears deep humming within and guesses that it's a ventilation shaft for some sort of underground facility. At night, he thinks he sees what is a ghost or a white monkey creeping around. The next morning, he finds his time machine has disappeared. Following marks on the ground, he surmises that it's inside the hollow pedestal of the Sphinx statue. Descending a well, he comes to a tunnel where he encounters the strange human-like creatures called Morlocks. Because they live in darkness, they're all white, apish, with grayish-red eyes. He looks into a large chamber where some are eating meat and realizes to his horror that it's Eloi flesh. After narrowly escaping, he theorizes that over time humankind developed into two species, capitalists and laborers. The rich, educated people became the Eloi, kind and innocent, but weak. The workers who built subways and railroads became the Morlocks. The time traveler stops his story to reveal to his guests flowers Weena put in his pockets. Continuing his story, the time traveler sees a large building that he calls the Palace of Green Porcelain, which turns out to be a museum. At night, he and Weena are attacked by Morlocks when they camp. The time traveler lights matches to drive them away. During the novel's exciting climax, the time traveler and Weena are attacked again, camping in the forest. And using a fire and a club as his weapons, the time traveler drives the Morlocks away. Tragically, Weena dies in the melee. Returning to the Sphinx, the time traveler finds the pedestal open. Morlocks are waiting for him, but he manages to leap into the machine and lift off, just in the nick of time. Phasing into the falling action, the time traveler lands millions of years later into a future that's like an alien planet. In the time machine's resolution, he finishes recalling his present tale. The next day, the narrator returns to the time traveler, finding him with a camera and a knapsack, setting off again to explore time. The narrator observes the machine disappear in a blur, and reports that the time traveler has not been seen since.
All right, so hopefully that sort of helps with answering parts A through D a little bit better. I think he goes a little bit more in depth about like the Ela and the Morlocks in that second video. Okay, so this question 2 is actually asking you 4 different things. And so the way that this says, it says present your response in 3 to 4 paragraphs. So if you look at it, each question you're being asked can be answered in a short paragraph. So if we look at it, let me break it down. Okay. Just to show you, we have 4 questions that you're being asked. All right, so what was your notion about science fiction as a literary genre before going through the time machine? So you're just answering that question. So what did you think about science fiction as a genre? Did going over the time machine change your opinion? Yes or no? Please answer in complete sentences. Don't just say yes or no. Would you classify the time machine as a serious literary work or a simple tale? Think about the deeper themes of class and all of that. And then what literary aspects led you to this conclusion? So in the end, how would you rate it from a literary perspective? So this would actually go with this one. This would be your conclusion. Okay, so 4 questions that you're answering, a couple of sentences completes a paragraph. So as long as you make sense, just write it out. It's not that hard. It's just asking some opinions about what you think about science fiction. Did this change your opinion? Is this, a tale with more depth? And that's really it as far as the H.G. Wells tutorial goes. So next week, we'll finish up with the war literature, and then I will post a study guide for Unit 9, and you'll be all set for that one. So have a good one. Bye.